something that's actually a fundamental shift in the way we do defensive testing. So about me, just another blonde Aussie hacker. I'm a recovering pen tester, went into solution architecture, and eventually went nuts and became an entrepreneur. Wife and 2 kids, so we've moved out to San Francisco recently, which has been great. And about 2 years ago, had this crazy idea that became what is now Bugcrowd, which is basically a company that connects security researchers to companies that need this type of testing done for bug bounties and also for coordinated disclosure programs. So what's a bug bounty program? Does anyone not know in this room? I'm assuming you're here because you do, and I'm probably not going to get any hands to that question anyway. What it is it's effectively a contest. So what you're doing is going out and saying the first person to find a unique issue in my system, reward that with cash. And social recognition. There's a few different ways to cut it up. That's the fundamental idea of it. Instead of going out and getting a single person to come in and look for a set period of time, you throw it open to a crowd. The history of bug bounty programs started in 1995, was the first precedent, which was Netscape. Then Mozilla and ZDI joined in. In 2010, all of the tech companies started to jump on board. At that point in time, the awareness of the idea basically started to trend north very quickly, which was good, but at the same time there was some negative consequences to that, because everyone knows that Bay Area tech startups are a little bit insane. 2013 we started our thing, and since then there's been other bounty as a service companies pop up as well. But really the tipping point, I think, in the last, when Microsoft their program, because you're going from this, quite distinct niche of companies that have a risk tolerance and all the different things that make them who they are, that makes it more conducive for them to run a bounty. Microsoft is obviously very much more in the enterprise corporate space. So what we've seen is that signaled out to the general market that, okay, this is a legit way to do stuff, and everyone's thinking about it. So why all the fuss? Running a bug bounty is a bold statement to the market, to your customers, to the research community. And crowdsourcing has been proven across many different business models as a low-cost, low-risk, cost-effective way to find security issues in software and in systems. But it's more than that. It's actually about leveling the playing field. The economics of how we do security testing today, when you think about it, are fundamentally disadvantaged to how the attackers are doing it, and bug bounties actually start to restore that. So when you consider more black or grey hat, I hate talking about hats because it's getting really murky these days, but it's a concept that I think everyone can grab a hold of, so we'll stick with it. Their goal is offensive. They want to find the bug, they want to exploit it, and they want to make sure it stays alive for as long as possible so they can continue to use it. And when you think about the resources they've got available to them, it's lots of time, lots of different skill sets, lots of different motivations, and the incentive structure that they have is that they get rewarded when they find something. That's their core thing that they do. Compare that to white hat economics. Our goal is defensive. The object of the game is to find a bug and kill it, right? But instead of using a crowd, we're using single sets of eyes that are being paid by the hour, and their incentive is to follow process. They're there to go through whatever's been set in front of them as the way to get this done. And that's critical, because if dollars equals time, the asymmetry of the economic model available to the attackers is going to throw it out, because we all know that it takes time to find this stuff. There's issues that surface very quickly, but the ones that really end up getting you in the end are the ones that you need to spend more time looking for. So the idea of it is, you've got the economics of incentivized disclosure, or a bug bounty program, which is combining the white hat goal with the black or grey hat economics and resourcing. There's a little bit of a case study. So Bugcrowd put $10,000 up in a bounty pool on WordPress. It was WordPress in the top 5 plugins by download. It was a 2-week process, and the way we structured the rewards was $2,500 for first place for the most creative or severe issue, then $1,500, and then $250 for everything else, or if there was more bugs than there was cash in the pool, we dilute that bottom tier. And it ran for 2 weeks. So over those 2 weeks, we saw 349 people participate. 243 submissions from 23 different countries. And the big thing is 7 unauthed to full privilege, 0-day vulnerabilities. There was some in WordPress and there was some in the plugins, and that's what came out of that engagement. So 67 rewardable issues in the end. So apart from the big ones, there was also lots of little ones. It diluted down in the end to $142 as what we paid out per issue. From an effort point of view, and this is the interesting piece, we had 16 active security researchers in the first hour of the bounty, and we worked out that there was about 8 hours of effort put in the first elapsed hour of the project. So when you compare that with $10,000 put into a consulting spend, where you've got one person being paid by the hour, we worked out it was about 5 days of effort, which is what you get for 10K in the consulting world, across the first 8 hours of the bounty. And the thing is that it was across 349 different people. So there's different skill sets, different sets of talent, different approaches to testing, and so on. Just going to grab some water for a sec here. So you guys have probably all heard Linus's law, right? With many eyes, all bugs are shallow. Really? So I'm going to talk, this is going to be fairly open source centric because it's, I think the open source model maps quite nicely to this approach, so we'll focus there. Linus was a little bit wrong. I mean, I think broadly speaking, that adage applies, but there's a few issues with it. When you think about what a developer is incentivized to do, right? Functionality ships products. What they're tasked with is making sure that the product does what it is meant to do. There have been lots of eyes on the new TLS and the OpenSSL code over the years, but the incentive for them was to find bugs that actually produce functional blockers in the product. And they've done their job. They've done what they were incentivized to do, broadly speaking. I'm sure there's a few instances where that hasn't worked out over the years, and you can come up and tell me about that later. But the OpenSSL example is one that obviously got introduced into this deck in the last 48 hours or so. So where does security fit into that? The new TLS bug, the go to fail bug, that had a time to live of 8 years. And people are saying that the Heartbleed bug had a time to live of 2 years. The reason for that is because the people that were looking at that code, who were perfectly capable, when you think about it, of finding those issues, didn't have the right incentive to actually hunt a security flaw out and deal with it. And this is the amended Linus's law. And this is a borrowed concept. The first time I heard this was a Peter Gutmann talk. With many eyes and the right incentive, all bugs are shallow. But the key ingredient there is actually what are you incentivizing? What is the thing that is causing that person to look at that code? What is the thing that they are actually driven to do? You need to connect the right incentive to the right outcome. So who's doing it well right now? These guys. People who view vulnerability discovery as a product creation process are very, very good at it because it's what they do. It's what they're incentivized to do. I remember after Pwn to Own, there was a lot of people saying, how does VUPEN do this? How do they keep on coming up with it? Well, it's simple. They hire good people and they pay them to hack stuff. That is their job and that is what they do day in, day out. And everyone on this slide, when you think about it, they rely on their ability to find exploitable issues to exist. And they've directly connected the value of vulnerabilities to what they do. And when you think about it, the incentive structure that they're all working under, it works for them. Doesn't it sound familiar? Sounds a little bit like a bug bounty program, right? So that's the concept. Bug bounties repurpose the economics of offense and make it available to the defensive side. And that's the big picture. So taking it from, here's this bold, badass statement about the fact that we're going to let the world come in and look for our stuff. That's great. That's very marketable, and that is one reason to do it. But then there's this whole thing of, okay, well, how are we going to actually effectively compete with that if we don't do this? So how do you get more eyes on security bugs? There's a bunch of different ways to do it. Cache is the most obvious one, right? Because it's something that everyone needs, everyone wants, and it's quite straightforward and simple. There's other ways to do it though. So there's soft incentives. You get people that offer swag, and researchers get very excited about that type of thing. Not as excited as they do about cache, but it's one of those things. It's a cred deal. Challenge coins, point systems, exclusive opportunities. One of the things that Bugcrowd does is we take, as well as cache, we take people that have developed their reputation and give them access to bounties that are closed off, that are private. Beyond that, you've got stuff like kudos systems. How do you actually feed back kudos to the testers, to the researchers? You get things like Hall of Fame, companies that set up like a Hall of Fame for everyone that's helped them out. You get a lot of companies that actually offer jobs to the testers that submit issues to them. And the thing is that being on a Hall of Fame does, there's lots of examples of people all around the world that have gotten employment out of this. Contract prospects, community kudos, and it's general swagger. I mean, it's cool to be able to say publicly that you found an issue. When you think about what most pen testers do as a day job, there's all these cool bugs and there's all these cool stories that we've got, but we can't talk about any of them because it was all done under NDA. In general, the way companies run bug bounty programs right now is that once the issue is fixed, you can go and talk about it in the public, and that's a huge thing. So, ready to start. Bug bounties are awesome, but when you start them, it's a little bit like this. You're basically opening a fire hose. So you're going out to the internet community, the bug bounty community in general, and saying, hey, come look at my stuff, but then also contact me with what you find, follow up for payment, do all these different sorts of things. And Bugcrowd's done 85 of these things so far. For almost as many companies. So here's a few things that you should consider if you're thinking about doing this for yourself. The mistake that everyone makes, almost without fail, is that they think it's going to be about managing the vulnerability data. Like, how do I validate the issues? How do I process these issues? How do I get it off into the dev team for remediation and so on? It's actually not. What you spend most of your time doing is dealing with the people. The community management aspect and the triage aspect, dealing with researchers and making sure you're keeping that community happy. And because they're happy, they're also engaged in helping you. That ends up being the lion's share of the work. And it's a good thing, right? If you're prepared for that, that's manageable, but you need to expect it. And don't forget about reward management as well. That piece is not a small one. The golden rule of it is to respect the researcher. When you think about it, these guys are doing this work for free. It's on spec in the sense that they're doing it without a guarantee of payment. You're not engaging them under a contract necessarily. It's not something that you can, that I as a researcher looking at a site can sit down and say, I know for a fact that I'm going to get something out of this. And from the company's perspective, you need to keep that in mind. Some of these guys, there's lots of different personalities that exist within this community, and sometimes dealing with the expectations that they carry when they do that is difficult. But if you're going to do this, then that's a part of the territory, and having that golden rule of, okay, I'm going to respect these guys because they're trying to help me and they're doing it for free, that's a really good baseline to have. And a little note I've got here, don't be a doormat, but answer questions and be available. So they don't run the show, you do, but respect the researcher. From a payment point of view, the baseline principle that we work off at Bugcrowd, because we run a bounty on our own stuff, obviously, is if you touch code, pay the researcher. So if you get an issue that comes in and it causes you to change your systems in any way, really, then you really ought to pay that. Partly that's just good ethics. That's just the right thing to do. But the other side of it is that they're going to be watching. What we see a lot is that once testers submit an issue, they'll keep looking at it, they'll keep looking at it, they'll keep looking at it, and they'll actually notice it's fixed oftentimes before we notify them that, yeah, thank you, we're gonna flick you some cash for that. So that's really important. Be upfront and clear about what you will and won't pay. The key to this is to make sure that the expectations between the researchers and your team are aligned, preferably before they start, which means you need to push as much information out to them as possible. So, you know, if you're working out things that are out of scope, things that you, like, what are the terms of the program, you know, are you going to pay for duplicates or not, different things like that. The more that you can get out to them before they engage, the more those expectations will be aligned, and the easier community management will become. I'll grab some water here. Be transparent about duplicates in particular. Duplicates are kind of a bummer in bug bounty programs for the researchers. Like, when you think about it as the company running the program, the whole goal of this is to take an unknown unknown and make it known. And that can only happen once. So it really only makes sense to pay for that once, which is why, you know, the way it's generally done is that the first person to find a unique issue is the one who gets paid, and everyone else gets a thank you, but doesn't get rewarded. That's a dynamic that people that are engaging with this type of thing are used to, so the precedent's already been set, but it is kind of a downer. So, yeah, the way to manage that is to be really transparent with the community and with the researchers about duplicates. You know, one of the things that Mozilla does, which I think is awesome, is that they actually make their bug tracker available to people that submit bounties to them. And if they notice duplicates that come in, they'll actually cut those new researchers in on the same issue ticket, so they can see, oh, okay, this is legit. They're not just trying to stiff me for some cash here. This was actually submitted by another researcher. Not everyone can do that. Obviously, Mozilla's open source, but, you know, that's an example of the level of transparency that you should try to aspire to. And the other one is won't fix issues. Sometimes you'll get stuff that'll come in that it's technically, if you're going to argue the toss on the technical merit of the submission, it is a security issue in that sort of sense, but you're not going to fix it, because for whatever reason, it could be functionality that's by design in the website. It could be something that, you know, the impact of that security issue is trivial to your company. Be open about that. I think one of the things that companies sometimes struggle with is this idea of going out and telling the researcher that, you know, if I tell them what I will and won't fix, like, that's giving away a lot of information about my security posture as a company. If you're concerned about that, then maybe you should fix the issue. But if you for whatever reason decide that you're not going to, then be open about that. And the ideal scenario here is that you take those issues and you actually push them up into the bounty brief, so that the researcher knows that you're interested in them before they actually start testing. Sometimes they'll argue. Most of the time they'll understand, because, you know, these guys are pragmatic, and most of the people that engage in this type of thing are doing it for lots of different companies. So there are precedents that are being established in the community about how this all works. But if you're clear up front, there's no reason for you not to stand your ground if there is ever a conflict, so to speak. Fix quick, pay quick. Prepare the necessary teams. So it's not just about, if this just sits in AppSec or InfoSec, then you're going to struggle, because there's more to it than that. There's downstream communication between your team and the developers that are ultimately going to remediate the issues. You've got payments, you've got all these other things, and having those teams prepared for this is really, really important. The other thing to consider there is that, you know, it's a different cadence of disclosure, so of remediation rather. So usually if you've got an information security team or an AppSec team that's going out and doing testing in an organisation, that'll be in waves. There'll be a schedule to that. It'll fit into a development cycle or whatever will happen, and that's kind of, you know, there's a cadence to that that's already established. Once you start inviting it in from the outside world, that cadence gets interrupted, and making sure that, you know, you can establish the brave new world is really important as you go along. Yeah, and don't pay payments. That's critical. You don't want to keep these guys waiting. And it's not because they'll do bad stuff. It's just because it's good manners, right? Expect front loading. So what happens when you launch, it was a bit like that picture that I put up, the GIF with the guy. You launch, people get excited, you'll get a lot of attention early on, and hopefully what will happen is that you'll find a lot of stuff that you didn't know was there beforehand early on. So there's this natural kind of hump in the process as you kick things off. And that goes depending on how big your environment is for a couple of months generally, and then it'll start to settle down into BAU. So just expect that. You'll need to actually stack your team up a little bit up front to handle it, but then it'll settle out. One of the really interesting things that we've found, which was kind of an unexpected side effect but makes sense in hindsight, is that this is actually really good for improving security awareness in your development teams. The psychology of a bug that comes in from the outside of the organization as opposed to someone inside the organization hits a developer, hits the development team in a way that's different. When you think about it, the best way to get a company to care about security is to have them get owned, right? Is to have them, have an incident that's going to take someone from not caring to caring pretty quickly. And the thing about bug bounty programs is it's almost like you're creating controlled incidents to the teams that are responding to this stuff. What we've seen is, for pretty much everyone, a lot of companies have, if there's a CISO that hasn't been there before they started, they quickly install one afterwards because they realize, okay, there's processes that we don't have established that we really need someone to come in and drive and lead. But for the dev teams and for the people that are actually responsible for creating this attack surface in the first place, what it does is it takes security from being this list of checks and balances that they have to get through before they can push a feature to something that's just a nascent awareness of the threat, right? So they're sitting there saying, okay, this guy in the Ukraine who's friendly and participated in our program found an exploitable issue in my software. I wonder if his neighbor did the same thing. And it actually connects the reality of the fact that this is not an abstract threat. This is actually happening. And the fact that we've got this program in place to encourage the communication, that's fantastic, but wow, it's real. It's a good thing. Dan Crowley, I think, spoke about this yesterday, talking about how to take a behavior from being something that's being, that you're trying to shoehorn people in your organization through to just own. And I think this is a really good example of that. And if you're going to do it, expect it and actually drive it. Like that phenomena, take it, grab it. Yeah, cool. Let's do that. Thanks. Sorry, guys. It's all right. I'm hearing myself. Yep. All right, just give me a test. Hello. Hello. Cool, yeah, so expect that behavior, expect that outcome in the team, and if it's something that you're struggling to do in your organization at the moment, like use it, grab it and use it and drive that whole thing. Oops. And just one other thing to keep in mind is that, remember that bounty hunting is casual testing. It's not committed testing. So what you've got generally is people that have particular skill sets, particular things that they really like to go out and find, that they'll say, okay, here's a new bounty. I'm really good at remote code execution. I'm really good at cross-site scripting. I'm really good at mobile apps, whatever it might be. And they'll go out and they'll take a bit of a snack on your bounty program, so to speak. And sometimes you get people that'll come in and be more committed, but across the crowd, that's the type of behavior you're going to get from it, which is good because the fact that there's lots of eyes on target means that there's lots of different favorite techniques that are being employed for this. So across the group, you actually end up with really good coverage. But to keep, the thing to keep in mind there is that as it starts to settle down and as you start to remediate and establish this cadence of responding to disclosures and remediating against them, Yeah, you might want to give it a bit of a nudge. One of the things that we've seen companies do, and that we've done for companies as well, we've done it for ourselves, is if it starts to sort of plateau off a bit, then we increase the rewards. Because at that point, okay, you've remediated a bunch of issues, your dev team's gotten smarter, all that kind of stuff. It should be harder for people to find stuff, so the payouts should, the amount that's actually being spent on the program shouldn't increase necessarily, but the increased potential of a reward drives attention back to the program. And you can do that for specific parts of your environment as well. So say there's a new feature that's coming out, or a new site, or whatever it is, you can say, okay, for the next period of time, we're going to double the rewards for issues that come in over here. There's all these sorts of behaviors that you can trigger, but the thing to keep in mind is that these guys are doing this. They're generally not subsisting off bounty hunting. They'll be pen testers, or they'll be security people that work for companies that do this as a side thing. And just keeping that in mind to get the kind of results that you want is a good thing. Conclusion. So yeah, bug bounties are, it's cost effective, it's highly marketable, but that's not the full story. This shift in strategy, we believe, is necessary to address the fundamental asymmetries in how we do what we do right now. And we're pretty pumped about it. I mean, obviously, we've bet the barn by starting a company to actually make this happen for people. But we're pretty excited. So go start one. There's a bunch of tips on how to structure your program, how to engage with researchers and so on our blog. And yeah, any questions? Yeah, no problems.
I put it in first, and they may or may not come back later to put in the more details and better.
Yeah, the easy way to get around that, definitely that happens. Yeah, repeating the question, good point. So the question was, given that it's first defined, how do you work around people that just put the bare minimum in to state their claim, but don't necessarily give the necessary information to fix the issue? The way that we do that, the way that we train the researchers on our platform to behave with that type of thing, is that if it's incomplete, if it's not enough, then it won't be rewarded, basically. So you say, yeah, okay, submissions that don't provide enough detail for us to be able to reproduce this issue, or for us to actually understand what the issue is in the first place. If you submit like that, and then if the next person submits something that's full and detailed and that works for us, then they're the one that's going to get the reward, not you. Yeah. And again, if you're upfront about that, this is one of those things that if you say that sounds draconian, I think, in some ways, but it also makes sense. And if you're upfront in your brief about how you're going to do that, then it works. Any other questions?
Do you ever have a situation where you'd like to use a model like this anonymously, and also in an environment where you've got where you're worried about potentially using it afterwards? It's kind of a two-part question.
Sure, so the first part is...
The first part is there any way that, for example, I'm just imagining a scenario where you build a test environment that's completely anonymous and says, well, I don't want people to know it's my company is doing tests, but I want to put the environment where people do on it,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the question is there any way to do this anonymously? Like, can you crowdsource a security test and have it not necessarily be attributable to your company? Yeah, I mean, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. Part of the way we do it, the platform, we attribute reputation to the testers based on what they've done in the past. If there's instances where the company wants that, then the way we engage those testers is a little different. We say, okay, this is not an open thing, it's something that you're engaging with under NDA. And here is the target over here. So if you've got people that you've already got in, your quorum of researchers that are interested in your company that you know are good, then you can reach out to them specifically and offer that. In terms of putting something out on the net that's not attributable to your company and saying, have at it, technically there's nothing stopping you from doing that. Yeah. So the second question was? Cool, perfect. Yes? So, okay. Where do we see bug bounties going in the future, given the alternate economies for issues? I'll answer that question first. Look, there are very different dynamics. I mean, there's a bit of a misnomer that we bump into fairly regularly about the actual value of an exploit on a platform as opposed to in client-side software, because the time to live is very short on those. The detection of an exploit for a platform is generally relatively straightforward. If that platform's of any value, they've got teams who do that, and then once it's fixed and it goes away. So, the exception for that is bugs that enable financial fraud or that enable spam or things like that. But you're talking about $10,000, $20,000 as an upper ceiling, as opposed to $500,000 to $1 million for upper ceiling for client-side stuff or for widely deployed software. So on the platform side of things, we don't see. It's definitely a conversation that everyone wants to have. So there's that part of it as well. But really, it's a bit of a non-issue there. On the broader side of client-side software, things like OpenSSL, for example, and critical open source software, things like that, where we see it going is really an alternate market being established for vulnerabilities. And it's an interesting thing because you think about the whole. I mentioned it before, like for someone who wants to attack, part of their priority is making sure that bug doesn't get found and killed, right? So there's a premium on that versus on the white hat side, which is, the whole goal is to find the issue and get it sorted out. That only needs to happen once. So there is actually a discount to some extent to the relative cost of what you could get a disclosure for. I see that becoming a big thing over the next period of time, and there's bits of it already starting. And then in terms of your other question around how do you see it affecting coordinated disclosure and responsible disclosure, really what we like to see, and if you look at the trajectory of the slide I put in at the start, like it's gone from this kind of weird abstract concept that some crazy companies do to, okay, this is something that is becoming more normal now. The precursor to a bug bounty program in general is coordinated disclosure. It shows that there's a level of maturity in the organization that is open to talking to outside researchers, which is not, generally means that they've graduated from thinking that hackers are bad, scary people that, are just to be feared, to understanding the value of people with those skill sets. So I really see this becoming normal, going from being something that's abstract to something that is just what everyone does and what it's almost abnormal not to do over a period of time. The effect that has, a question I think you were kind of getting at in terms of how does that impact the behavior of people that are engaging in coordinated disclosure programs now. So are people who engage companies going to expect a reward? That's already happening. That's been happening, I think, over the past maybe 2 years, as the different markets have popped up and as bug bounty programs have started to pick up as well. I don't see, in some ways it's a negative impact because there's all of this work that was being done on the basis of altruism that's now got a financial incentive tied to it. So that's a negative impact, but you can look at it as a positive thing as well because, you're actually actively engaging this now rather than just sort of sitting there and responding to it on a reactive basis. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Any other questions? Going once. Cool. Thanks everyone for coming. Cheers.